Howdy everyone.
Before all you dick boys and breeders go off into the comments, all triggered by this video, I just want to say I don't actually personally believe that you shouldn't be allowed the same rights as everyone else. Just let me play devil's advocate for a second. I just think that the world benefits from some healthy discussion and debate, and no subject should be completely off the table. But all these straight right activists don't want us to talk about it. I have many cis friends who agree with everything I say. In fact, my editor is cis and straight, and he's greenlit everything I say here. So you really have no right to be offended just because you're unable to take an obvious joke. Obviously, I'm not cisphobic. I have nothing against cis people. If you were born with a dick and you want to wear suits and pretend to be a man or something, then that's fine. I can't stop you. I'm not going to stop you. I just think that it's not for me, and I don't really want to date your kind. So you'd better not call me cisphobic or anything in the comments, because I'm a proud cis ally. Now, all that being said, cis people, are you doing okay? You seem very not okay. And I can say that I used to think I was cis as a teenager, until I was finally able to admit to myself that it was just a phase. I was doing it for attention from all my cis friends. But every single cis person I've ever talked to has been very unhappy with their lifestyle. They even joke about how much they hate their wives. They joke about cheating, divorce, and not being able to express their emotions. And it's so sad that people like to think this is normal and healthy. And when you read statistics that say men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide, it's hard to believe that it's just a coincidence. The cis lifestyle just can't keep getting away with taking people's lives by forcing them to live a certain way. So it's time that we ask ourselves the question, do cis people deserve rights? Have we gone too far with radical wokeness to the point where we've been too afraid to question the cis agenda? Because it might be worth having some form of reasonable discussion to make sure that we can come to a final solution.
Now that we've had a healthy little bit of civil discourse without losing our marbles and going into an obsessive rage in the comments, let's get to discussing things like proper, reasonable adults. If you're cis or straight, you're probably at least a little bit uncomfortable by this point in the video. And part of me wants to say, good, because it was designed to do that. It's making fun of people complaining about heterophobia by providing a 2-minute taster of what real heterophobia would actually look like. Also, this is the same type of horseshit that trans people have to hear from self-proclaimed non-transphobes and allies all the time. So by just repeating the same thing verbatim, except in reverse, is only as phobic as all that is. But, at the same time,
the fact that cis people are uncomfortable is super fucking rich.
For queer people, this is the best acceptance has ever been. 20 years ago, if you told the trans community that the popular discourse about trans or non-binary people would be about sports and access to healthcare, rather than whether you're even real and defending the trans panic defense, that would sound like an absolute pipe dream. If you told queer folk in the year 2001, or heck, even 2011, that a majority of people in most English-speaking countries in the world even accepted their existence as real, that would be genuinely mind-boggling to them. And the fact that cis people get to be uncomfortable with that, how blissfully unaware can you be to assume that this is abnormal? How aggressively unaware do you have to be to pretend that this is even allowed to make you uncomfortable? Looking at the difference between certain categories of people, like cis, trans, non-binary, straight, gay, black, white, rich, poor, disabled, gamer, and so on, as a hierarchy that can be mapped and illustrated, is often less than practical. Society is a lot more complicated than that. And though trends can certainly be observed, and some groups are a lot more hated than others, saying that every straight and cis person will definitely have it harder than any gay or trans person, for example, is very reductive. Instead, there's generally more of a direct tension between things that are normal and abnormal, and these are very at odds with one another. Being cis or straight or white or allosexual or able-bodied or neurotypical is normal, the default settings if you will, and anything other than that was probably just added into some video games to pander to the SJW woke mob. A freak occurrence, an underclass, something that doesn't have to be catered to, other than in maybe a footnote or two if they won't shut up about it, but we'll make sure to give them the stink eye if they get too antsy again. In other words,
remember who's on whose hand here.
And having more than one of those traits at once probably never happens since they're so rare that we don't even have to imagine them. This leads to certain rituals that mark out some people's behaviors, and people in any of those quote normal groups have a vested interest in holding onto their position at the top of that hierarchy. For example, when you bring up cis people in conversation, sometimes they like to complain about being labeled as cis or heterosexual, in favor of words like normal. And it's a bit weird, because they've been more than happy to label everyone else as abnormal for centuries, so that they can better alienate us from society. But now that they've been given a label themselves, not even a derogatory one, just a label, all of a sudden they like to complain and throw a tantrum, call it straight phobia or an attack on biological women. Corvidae has a wonderful video about it here, check that out. But it's almost like a 10-year-old playing tag, only when it finally becomes their turn to be the chaser, they run inside and stop playing because it's not fun anymore. And it's honestly a little bit immature. You won't last very long in the real world acting like that all the time. But there's this idea baked into cis people, and I can speak on cis people issues because I used to be one of you until I grew out of it. But there's this internal belief that if you have to be labeled to be described, then you're not normal. A lot of people really want to think that they're normal, and think that they need to be considered as normal in order to be accepted in society. In my experience, these people tend to be cis women, because while cis men usually just remain shamelessly oblivious to the expectations placed upon them, cis women, at least often enough, know what it's like to be on the end of an oppressive system, so they try to keep certain demographics underneath them in the social hierarchy in order to not face the full brunt of the backlash against them, all the while failing to acknowledge that that's what the system is trying to get them to do in the first place. That being said, I could be wrong about that. Anecdotal evidence isn't evidence, and a lot of men also demonstrate this behavior too, so do take that with a grain of salt. But at the core of it all, there's this pride, this obsession with being a normal person, of having a cemented place in the hierarchy, where even if you're definitely being oppressed, you're not at the bottom, so you're still benefiting from the system more than most people are. You're more likely to side with the people above you than those below you. You have a vested interest in keeping the system as it is, because you at least have some power, some control over the people below you, because you fit into a bubble of normalcy that they don't and never will fit into. It's a tyranny of the majority. But with that also comes the inverse, where if they can't maintain that level of control, and you're not the only one with labels, for example, there's this fear that maybe we'll finally do to cis people what they've been doing to us all this time. This is, of course, horseshit. The idea that accepting LGBTQ+ people into society fully means taking away from the rights of cis straight people is incredibly short-sighted and just as incredibly wrong. There isn't a maximum word count in the law or anything, and the LGBTQ+ community certainly isn't about to add one. The aim of queer rights activists is not trying to reverse the hierarchy and make straightness no longer normal, and it never has been. Whatever monster of the queer community you've constructed, all that happened inside your head. We're just trying to add being gay or trans or non-binary or asexual or aromantic to that normal group. Or, even better yet, removing the idea of normal from society in general. Since humans are all incredibly different, we're all individualistic individuals with individual choices and individual lives, and removing aspects of ourselves in order to conform to some aspect of normal is the least human thing out there, as dictates the benevolent capitalist system that is our human nature that we exist in, apparently. That's what this video is about. When I say, are straight people okay? I'm using satire to target very specifically the weird rituals that enforce this thing called heteronormativity. the idea that it's the norm or the expectations that people be straight in very specific ways. The, "oh, I hate my wife so much" jokes that imply that hating your wife is normal, for example. Like, that's really weird. All of this is to say that cis people cannot even comprehend what it's like to go through being trans or non-binary. Not because it isn't fun, and trust me, it's very fun, but because they'd realize how much they suck as people. Anyway, if you're a cis person and you made it this far in the video, then congratulations. This is your daily positive reinforcement for doing the bare minimum. Well done! But also, if you like this video, please be sure to like the video, comment to let me know you like the video, and subscribe for more videos like it. Also, can I get an F in the comments for the straight people who didn't make it through the first 2 minutes of the video, because they're lost causes and they probably need it. Also, follow my socials on screen for cool posts such as this one. Anyway, stay safe, stay spicy, and as always, have a good